Move, Autumn! My father's voice sliced through the terminal like a blade. My sister's laughter followed high, polished, cruel. She can't even afford economy. Cameras turned, whispers spread. I didn't move. I just stared at my reflection in the glass, calm, unreadable, waiting. 2 years ago, I would have crumbled. Not today. A man in uniform stopped beside me. "Miss Monroe, your jet is ready." My father's smirk cracked. Leia's hand slipped from her designer bag. I smiled faintly. Perfect timing. They thought I'd come to watch them leave. They were right, just not in the way they think. 2 years earlier, before airports and headlines, before anyone cared who I'd become, I was just another name printed under my father's company logo. Monroe Engineering. Seattle. Family business. At least that's what I used to call it. Back then, I believed loyalty meant safety. If I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, maybe he'd see me. I was the responsible one, the daughter who handled deadlines, cleaned up after mistakes, stayed late when others left. I never asked for attention. I just wanted respect. Dad wasn't cruel then. He was just busy, a man who measured love in results. His watch never left his wrist, his tone always somewhere between pride and impatience. "You're sharp, Autumn," he used to say, "but you need to toughen up if you want to lead." I thought that was advice. I didn't realize it was a warning. The shift started small. One Sunday dinner, he brought her Clara. She was 30, stylish, the kind of woman who knew how to make a man feel young again. She laughed at his old jokes, placed her hand on his sleeve when he spoke. I smiled polite, but something inside me stiffened. By Thanksgiving, she'd moved in. By Christmas, her daughter Leia was sitting in my old chair at the table, her voice filling the space where mine used to belong. Leia was 5 years younger, perfect hair, perfect timing. She knew how to compliment without meaning it. "You're so smart, Autumn," she'd say, eyes gliding over my worn sweater. "I wish I had your discipline." It sounded like praise, but it landed like pity. Dad adored her. Everyone did. She made noise where I made order. When I finished a project, he'd nod. When she sent an email, he'd clap. "That's initiative," he'd say. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that family changes and maybe this was mine expanding. But every week the air shifted, small, sharp comments slipped into conversation. Leia's more relatable dad said once, glancing at my plain suit, "Clients love personality." That night, I went home and stared at the glow of my laptop, my project file open. It was an algorithm that could cut logistics costs by 40% a system. I'd built line by line, believing it would be my legacy. I named it Monrovia. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom, ready to present. Leia was already there, sitting in my seat. Her hair curled perfectly, a folder in front of her labeled "New Proposal." My stomach sank. Dad smiled like nothing was wrong. "We're streamlining the process. Leia will take the lead on this one. You'll support from back end." The words hit harder than any insult. Support. From back end. I wanted to speak, to say it was mine, that I'd spent 6 months building it. But then I looked at his face, calm, sure, proud of the choice he thought was strategic, and I knew nothing I said would change it. So I nodded. Of course. He mistook my quiet for obedience. He didn't realize silence can record everything. After the meeting, Leia leaned over my chair, perfume sweet and heavy. "Don't take it personally," she whispered. "It's just business." Business. The word tasted like iron. That night, I copied my files onto a single USB drive, slipped it into my coat pocket, and walked out of Monroe Engineering for the last time. Outside, the sky was the same color as steel. Cold. Predictable. I looked back once at the glowing sign, his name still shining above the door, mine erased beneath it. He told me once I'd never make it without him. I didn't argue. I just decided to prove him wrong. It didn't happen all at once. Favoritism never does. It creeps in quietly like fog, soft, polite, impossible to name until you can't see the road ahead anymore. A month after I left, Dad called. Not to ask how I was, but to say he hoped there were no hard feelings. Leia had just been featured in a business magazine for revolutionizing Monroe Engineering's new logistics division, my algorithm. The article quoted him, "She's a natural leader, charismatic, forward-thinking. Reminds me of myself." I read it twice. He'd never said that about me. Not once. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The silence between us was its own obituary. Still, I checked their updates, sometimes habit, maybe punishment. Leia on red carpets at charity dinners, shaking hands with investors who once called me kiddo. She smiled for every camera like she'd earned the flash. And Dad stood beside her proud like nothing about that picture was stolen. When my mother died years ago, I promised myself I'd keep the family together, that I'd be the bridge. But some bridges shouldn't be crossed twice. By the end of that year, I'd poured everything into Monrovia Systems, the name no one at Monroe Engineering even remembered. I rented a small workspace above a coffee shop, worked nights after my day job, living off vending machine, coffee, and hope. Meanwhile, Dad sent Christmas photos matching pajamas, champagne glasses, Monroe family holiday. Leia wore a diamond bracelet. I recognized it immediately. It was Mom's. That picture did something to me. Not rage exactly, something colder, quieter. The kind of anger that doesn't burn, it freezes. I didn't reply to his email that year either. Weeks turned into months. Investors said no. Banks said no. One night after another rejection, I sat in the dark office and whispered, maybe he's right. Maybe I can't make it without him. And then my phone lit up an auto notification. Someone at Monroe Engineering had logged into my old account. The file name flashed on my screen, Monrovia Prototype V2.0. They were still using it. My code, my work. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loud, not messy, just final. I shut the laptop, took a long breath, and said out loud for the first time, he'll see me, just not the way he expects. From that night on, everything changed. I started small, local contracts, small freight companies willing to test my software, then regional partners. Then one day, a major investor from New York called. He'd heard about an independent system outperforming Monroe Engineering by 200%. When he asked for the founder's name, I almost smiled. Autumn Monroe, I said. Yes, that Monroe. The following week, my company's first press article came out. The headline read, "The quiet innovator behind the future of AI logistics." Quiet. I like that word. Because while they laughed, while they clinked glasses and posed for cameras, I'd been building a storm. And storms don't announce themselves. They arrive. 2 years later, the phone rang on a gray Tuesday morning. It was my father. His number, after months of silence, looked foreign on my screen. Autumn, he said, clipped formal. We're expanding the company. There's a family event this weekend. You should come. A family event. Not a dinner, not a reunion, an event. I almost said no. But something in his tone made me curious. When I arrived, the lobby of the Monroe Tower was draped in banners celebrating innovation, Monroe Engineering and Partners. Photographers stood by the elevator, champagne glasses sparkled, and at the center of it all, Leia. She stood on the stage beside Dad, hair shining under the lights, voice smooth into the microphone. It's an honor to unveil our latest breakthrough, Monroe VIA Systems. The name hit me like a punch. Monroe, VIA. They hadn't even bothered to change it completely. The crowd clapped. Flashbulbs popped. Dad smiled, wide hand resting proudly on Leia's shoulder. My chest tightened. The presentation continued, slides rolling behind them. My interface, my layouts, my code. Every inch of it. No credit, no trace of me. Just applause. I didn't move. I couldn't. I watched the room, every handshake, every camera flash, the way Dad's eyes gleamed when investors surrounded him. He'd taken everything. Again. When the applause faded, I turned to leave. That's when Leia saw me. She hesitated, then smiled tight, careful. Autumn. I didn't know you'd come. You didn't invite me. Dad turned surprised. You could have said hello. Don't make this awkward. I met his eyes. This, I gestured around the lights, the banners, the code I built. This is awkward. He sighed the way he always did when I didn't play along. You're being dramatic. It's just business. You should be proud of theft. Leia chimed in, syrupy sweet. Come on, Autumn. It's all in the family. Something inside me went still. It wasn't anger. It wasn't grief. It was the sound of a door closing for good. I'm not family, I said quietly. Not yours. Dad's face hardened. You watch your tone. I looked at him one last time, steady. You said I'd never make it without you. You were right about one thing. I didn't make it with you either. Then I turned and walked out. Outside, the night air bit cold against my face. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just kept walking until the tower disappeared behind me. That moment flipped a switch in me. I realized they would never see me unless I forced them to. Not with words, not with tears, only with success so undeniable it would silence them. When I got home, I sat at my desk, opened a new document, and wrote one line across the top: Monrovia Systems. Version 3.0. Founder Autumn Monroe. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was the blueprint for it. The first 6 months after that night were brutal. I worked from a second-hand desk wedged between my kitchen and the living room. The apartment was small enough that when the coffee pot hissed, I could feel the steam on my back. Most nights I'd fall asleep with my laptop still open, code glowing against my face like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I didn't have funding. I didn't have connections. What I had was an idea everyone else had dismissed: a smarter, faster logistics AI that could predict shipment delays before they happened. The same one they'd stolen and renamed. I called it Monrovia Systems again, not as a copy, but as a reclamation. People laughed when I pitched it. Investors wanted experience, not integrity. Banks wanted collateral. I had neither. So I sold my car, then my jewelry. I moved into a smaller place, just me and the hum of a machine that felt more alive than the people I'd left behind. My assistant came later, Sophie, a bright 20-something, who believed before there was any reason to. She handled calls while I coded through the night, whispering things like, "They're going to regret underestimating you." I didn't respond, but I heard her. Year 1 bled into year 2, and something shifted. A small shipping company in Portland signed with us, then another in Chicago. Then one morning, I woke to an email that made my hands shake. Subject: Partnership Inquiry, Global Tech Logistics. By the end of that month, Monrovia Systems wasn't a dream anymore. It was a corporation, my corporation. And somehow word got out. The same industry blogs that once featured Leia started running stories about the mysterious founder taking over the logistics field. A few even asked if I was related to the Monroe family. I ignored the messages. I wanted silence to do the talking. Then came the Global Tech Summit, New York City, fall, the biggest event of the year. Monrovia Systems had been chosen as the keynote sponsor. When Sophie told me, I just said, "Good. Make the arrangements." 2 weeks later, I was standing in Terminal 3, the same terminal where 2 years earlier my father and Leia had laughed as I walked away. I wore a simple navy suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry except a watch that used to belong to my mother. The flight board flickered. New York, boarding first class. That's when I heard it. Move Autumn. The same tone, same edge. Like no time had passed. Leia's heels clicked on the polished floor. "She can't even afford economy," she said, voice sweet and venomous. People looked. Phones lifted. The air shifted, heavy and electric. I didn't move. I didn't look at them. I watched my reflection in the glass, calm, unreadable, waiting. 2 years ago, I would have crumbled. Not today. Then came the sound that changed everything: boots. Polished. Firm. A man in a Navy uniform stopped beside me, posture crisp. "Miss Monroe," he said, "your jet is ready." Every noise in the terminal seemed to vanish. My father froze mid-smirk. Leia's hand slipped from her designer bag. Her boarding pass fluttered to the ground. I turned slowly, offering the faintest smile. Perfect timing. Gasps rippled. The crowd parted as I followed the officer toward the private terminal. Through the glass wall, a sleek black car waited on the tarmac beside a jet bearing my company's logo, Monrovia Systems. Behind me, I could feel their eyes burning through the glass. My father once said I'd never make it without him. He was right. I made it beyond him. The officer opened the car door. "We'll begin pre-flight when you're ready, ma'am." I nodded. "Let's go." As the door shut, the sound of laughter, their laughter was replaced by the low hum of the engines warming up. For the first time in 2 years, I felt weightless. Not because of the altitude, but because I'd finally stopped carrying their approval. Success hadn't been the revenge. Peace was. and peace, I realized, looked a lot like flying alone. The moment I stepped onto the tarmac, the noise of the terminal vanished behind the glass. It was like walking out of one life and into another. The jet gleamed under the afternoon light, white and silver against a sky the color of calm. Grant, my security officer, waited beside the stairs, posture straight, expression unreadable except for the faint trace of a smile. "Welcome back, Miss Monroe," he said. For a second, I just stood there watching the sunlight ripple across the fuselage. Inside the terminal, I could still see them, my father, my stepsister, frozen in disbelief as passengers whispered around them. The same mouths that had laughed moments ago now murmured in awe. The entire platform froze. Grant followed my gaze. "Didn't expect that, did they?" I shook my head slowly. "No one ever does when you rise quietly." We boarded. The door closed with a soft hiss, sealing out the world I used to beg to belong to. The hum of the engines built under my feet, steady, powerful, alive. I sank into the leather seat by the window. Outside, the glass of the terminal reflected my jet like a mirror. For a fleeting second, I saw both versions of myself, the woman who once stood small in that reflection, and the one sitting here now, untouchable. My phone buzzed. Dad flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mia." He started, his voice sharp, almost panicked. "It's Autumn," I said evenly. He hesitated. What are you doing?" I looked out the window where the ground crew was giving clearance for takeoff. "Exactly what you said I couldn't." He didn't reply, just breathing, heavy, slow. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "But I learned that loving you meant losing myself." So I stopped. There was a long silence. Then click. He hung up. The engines roared. The jet began to move, rolling past the window where they still stood small behind the glass. For years, they made me feel grounded, trapped, small, insignificant. Now, as the jet lifted, I realized something simple and true. Some goodbyes aren't spoken. They're written in altitude. Manhattan shimmered below like a field of light, the skyline cutting through clouds like ambition made solid. Grant brought me a glass of water, but I barely noticed. My eyes stayed on the horizon. In that glow, I thought about everything that had led here: the boardroom, the laughter, the airport. Every time they said I wasn't enough, I had believed it a little, until I learned belief doesn't have to come from them. 2 years ago, I left with nothing but a file and a name they tried to erase. Now that name was etched on a jet engine, a company, a legacy. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove I was always right to walk away. My phone buzzed again, dozens of missed calls from the same number. I turned it face down. Some echoes don't deserve answers. Through the glass, the clouds parted, soft, endless, weightless. I smiled to myself, a real one this time. They thought I came to watch them leave. Turns out I was the one taking off all along. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you've ever had to choose peace over approval, remember this. You don't owe anyone smallness just because they're comfortable with it. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away to find your peace? Leave your story in the comments, because sometimes the quietest exits make the loudest returns.